And I was going to say, and you three men, if you want a carnation, you can come up also and get one of these carnations. I don't know if you've heard this song. Some of you are country western aficionados, so maybe you have. But it goes like this. Many, many years ago, when I was 23, I was married to a widow who was pretty as could be. This widow had a grown-up daughter who had hair of red. My father fell in love with her, and soon they were wed. This made my dad my son-in-law and changed my very life. For my daughter was my mother because she was my father's wife. To complicate the matter, even though it brought me joy, I soon became the father of a bouncing baby boy. My little boy then became a brother-in-law to Dad. And so became my uncle, though it made me very sad. So his baby is now his uncle. And so, for if he was my uncle, then that also made him brother of the widow's grown-up daughter, who of course was my stepmother. You're not going to be able to follow this, I promise you. Father's wife then had a son who kept him on the run, and he became my grandchild, for he was my daughter's son. My wife is now my mother's mother, and it makes me blue because although she is my wife, she's my grandmother too. If my wife is my grandmother, then I'm her grandchild, and every time I think of it, it nearly drives me wild. For now I have become the strangest case you ever saw. As husband of my grandmother, I am my own grandpa. That is crazy. But I mean, if I slowed down and read that and read it again and again, I can follow it when you go slowly through it. And it's all true. I mean, the way he comes at this thing. Of course, the chorus is, I'm my own grandpa, I'm my own grandpa. I didn't know if you'd ever heard that or not. And I'm going to try to find the music and we'll sing it some Sunday. We'll look for a way on next Mother's Day to try to get this worked in. And I apologize. You know what? I was the one who cut you all off and didn't let you play that song you worked on this week. And oh, well, okay, thank you. That's the first mistake I've made since I've been here. And she's still laughing up here, maybe at the end of the service on that one line. Again, for this man I was telling you about earlier, John Killinger, he also wrote about an experience he had with his two teenage sons. He said that they had a visit one time in their home from the son's favorite teenage cousin and female, and she came to be with him, and they played this game called Blind Man's Bluff. And I don't know if you've ever seen that or heard about it, but what happens is that they're in one room and one person goes out and they blindfold that person, and they come back in, and when they come in, the other persons have hidden themselves, and the game is to try to, as quickly as you can, find those other people. And he said that they played a trick on this cousin of theirs that they loved very much and wanted to tease and play with. And when she was out of the room, not only did they blindfold her, but they rearranged everything in the room where it made no sense to her. In other words, what she had seen when she left, it was not there. She came back in, and it was a mess. And she was bumping into everything. She fell over twice. She ran into the wall. Said that finally, after minutes of this going on and on, he said for some reason she fell to the floor and began to sob. She was so discouraged she could not. She knew she wasn't going to win the game. I guess that's probably what got her most. But he said that she just was sobbing because of how everything was out of place. And he goes on to say that for him, in some ways, that is an illustration of what's happened in family life in our world. that everything has changed and is changing all the time, and that we're never quite in the same position that we were just a short time before. But the world in general is seeing changes in family in such a strong way that it's hard to recognize any longer what a family is all about and how you experience family life. I wanted today, on this particular day, to think about the changes that come in family life, because I've been with you long enough, I've been around you to know that many of you in this room today have experienced very significant changes in your family life in recent days, recent months. And I know also that all of us have experienced those sorts of things along the way. And the story that I want to read to you this morning is from the book of Ruth in the Old Testament. And if you have your Bible, I hope you'll open there, because we can refer to the text several times. I printed here that we were going to read verses 16 and 18 of chapter 1, but I'm going to read a little more than that, because we really need to get the whole story, the whole picture. Let's see if I can say it. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth. Just to help you know where to go to look, near the very beginning. This is a story that comes out of the period in the life of Israel that they call the Judges, the period of the Judges. The beginnings have happened. There's creation, and then there's the development that Noah comes along, and then there's Abraham, who is called by God to establish a nation, and he goes forth. You have the stories in the beginning, the first 5 books of the Bible of Jacob and Esau and Joseph. What am I trying to say here? Esau's, Jacob and Joseph. I'm going to stop. I'm going to say Jacob and Joseph. And then there's Moses that comes along. And then following Moses, there's the period of this. Joshua goes in and conquers the land, and they divide it up into tribes. And while they are there, they sort of live in a tribal state. They're not united. They have this tribe, and all the 12 tribes are doing their thing. And they have these enemies that are outside of the area where they are. They continue to have skirmishes in warring kind of situations on the inside with the people who are the Canaanites who are still around. But there are other times, there are Edomites and different groups that continue to press in on them. And as they have these fights, they are in need of someone who is a great deliverer. And so these judges, these redeemers, kind of is the word, come along, and they are warriors. They are people who have the capacity of uniting the people to stand against certain enemies that they have. And you'll remember names of some of them. There's Samson, of course, is one of the ones that we remember a lot. That's one of the great names that's there. But these judges, in this period of time, there's a story that's recorded for us of a family. What I love about Ruth is that this book is like life in general. Most of the time we're thinking about life as being in relationship to these authorities, these big picture people that we hear about in our nation or in our world. But there's everyday life that is going on down in here. I've often said that, one of the great struggles, and I think in our nation, is that we get confused with the fact that this is where people live down here. And all the stuff that we hear about on television and so forth at the national level is not what everyday life is. And if we could just get to know everyday people, in fact, I think this is true about nations. If we could, as nations, get to know everyday people, we wouldn't be having a lot of the wars that we're having. Because it's simply that people in authority lead us into those sorts of things because other folks have led their people into that sort of thing, and so we're responding, and there's a war that comes. But it's everyday people. There is a family that we're going to learn about here that was living in Bethlehem. Verse 1 of chapter 1, in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. And so a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab and lived there. So the famine that happened caused them to move. They moved eastward across the Dead Sea into what's called the land of Moab. And so they lived there. Now, Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died. So they go to the new place and there's death. So there's transition that begins to happen. This family that decides we've got to have help, they move, and after they get there, there's a death. And she's left with her 2 sons. Well, these 2 sons then marry Moabite women. They are not Jewish women, they are Moabite women. They're in this land and they meet these women and they marry. One is named Orpah, Orpah, and the other one is Ruth. And after they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion died. And so Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. Now, isn't that a tragedy to think about? Here is a woman who has lost this family that she came to this strange land with. So this transition is taking place. It is, all of a sudden, she has lost the home life that she knew. What's left behind are 2 daughters-in-law. And they are also part of the story here going forward from verse 6, in which after a while, what Naomi says is, let's go back. She heard that the famine that had existed in Jerusalem or in Bethlehem had been taken care of. God had blessed and there had been resources come, and so they were going to go. She wanted to go back to her homeland, and she takes these 2 daughters-in-laws, and along the way, she tells them to go back. And I'm not sure why she told them this, but go back. And so one of them chooses to go back. One of them, Ruth, chooses to stay with her. And you have these wonderful verses that are read at probably 50% of all weddings, trying to describe the love of a man and a woman, when what it means here, this is Ruth speaking to her mother-in-law. And she says to Naomi, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. And when Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. And so the 2 women went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the woman exclaimed, the women exclaimed there in Bethlehem, can this be Naomi? And Naomi says, don't call me Naomi. She told them, call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. She's angry with God. And incidentally, in the period of the Judges, God is a very dynamic actor in their lives. Very dynamic. And so they think in terms of what God is doing, how God is leading them. And one of the things that they believed was that everything that happened to them was God doing this to them. I think that belief began to be altered over time. But what Naomi is saying is, I'm getting it from God, and I'm bitter. He's turned me into this bitter life. In verse 21, she said, I went away from here full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. You know, when these great changes come in our lives, when these tragedies, and sometimes they're not just tragedies, but they're just natural development in life, when children grow up and they leave, maybe even you could think of in terms of when the first child goes off to kindergarten. But for sure, you know, when they're married or when they leave the home to go off to school or when they get out there into the world in some particular way and no longer, that's a change. It's a really significant change for people. There's death that happens in our lives. There's divorces that happen along the way. There are some people, by the way, in life who never marry, who choose singleness and who have singleness in their lives, even some who do not want that, but that's the life that they live. And they have to find some place in which they experience family life. We're created for family. We're created for belonging to one another. And what happens in the lives that we live, there are just these natural upheavals that come upon us. And some of them are profound, some of them are less profound, but they still alter the sense of home that we have. And if we are going to experience healthy homes, if we're going to have homes in which we experience life, this togetherness, this loving togetherness, if we're going to have it, and it's going to be healthy, if it's going to be what God wants it to be, we're going to have to figure out how to have home some other way than we've had it. Does that make sense? We're going to have to, as I like to say, go home by another way. We're going to have this home life that's different from what we experience. And Naomi and Ruth are experiencing home in another format from what they experienced in the beginning. Naomi really is the one who is deeply hurt by what's happened. And so the tragedies or the changes that have come upon them bring them back to Bethlehem. And the two of them began to live their lives there. I want to tell you this morning that I think if we're going to have the kind of home life that we need to, that honors God and that pleases the Lord, it's going to have to be that we take care of ourselves for the sake of our future, for the sake of our moving forward in the way of a family. I think that when Naomi decided to go back home, there was some internal desire in her. I need this. I must have this. I must go back to the people that I know, back to Bethlehem, back to experiencing the life and the culture. And you know in chapters 2, 3, and 4, you experience there a man named Boaz who was a part of her late husband's family circle. Elimelech, one of his relatives, is Boaz. And he becomes a central figure in this story with Ruth. They ultimately marry. There's a child that comes to them. But there's this need inside of Naomi. I got to go home. And so she begins going home. And along the way, she's saying to the two daughter-in-laws, go back. You all don't go with me. This won't be good for you. Because if you go, you're not, I think what she was thinking was, if you're going to be with me, you're going to want to be married to sons that I have. And I'm too old to have more sons. And even if I could have more sons, would you hang around long enough for them to get old enough so that you could marry them and become your own grandpa? That's kind of what she said. Would you want to wait around that long? And she's discouraging them to go back because they need something else. Not what she needs, but they need what they need. And I think she's right. I know she's right. What she's wanting is the best for them. And so she's saying, go back. Orpah gets bad press sometimes. People say that Orpah didn't stick with Naomi and she went back to Bethlehem. But I'm telling you, who knows? Who knows? Orpah may have decided what I need for myself is not to leave these people. Maybe her personality, her needs, her issues. She said, I'm staying. But Ruth, along with Naomi, they go forward because the needs in their lives drew them on to Jerusalem. I hope that you're here today, that when these kind of tragedies come and when these changes come, we need to begin looking about and thinking about what is it that's best. I know when my father died at the age of 57, my mother, who was left behind, spent the next 40 some odd years without him. She married and divorced one other time, and after that was a short time, very short period of time that she had with another man. But in the very beginning, there was conversation with my sister, my two siblings, my sister, my brother, and myself, and mother, about what she needed to do, because now she had lost the husband that had been hers for 27 years. So what are you to do? And her decision was, and it was partly, I was a part of this conversation. Brother was married, sister was married, and I was saying to them, she needs to stay here. By that time, I had learned a little bit about grief. And I was saying, I'd rather see her stay right here in the house. And really what I wanted was for us to have that home place. And I think she felt like it was home, and that was her decision. The best thing for me is to stay right here. But sometime after Susan and I were married, she began to feel that it was better for her to leave this home, to sell this home. And so we wrestled with that decision again. And I remember thinking, what is it that you need to do? And I was trying to talk her out of it, and she said to me, if I don't sell this, I won't have the resources I need, and that won't be good for y'all. So I am going to sell, and I'm going to get an apartment. And she did, and lived a wonderful, happy life without our house. And I'm thankful that she had the wisdom to see what was best for her. And I think the only way you know that is through the praying process and through the business of talking to people who are around you, who care about you, and coming to some decisions that have to do with your future and what it is that is best for you. So many people think it's not a good thing for me to think about myself. And I want to say that I operate on the basis of thou shalt love the Lord thy God and your neighbor as you love yourself. You need to have care for who you are and make decisions that fit your life. I think also when you look at this Ruth story, another thing you're going to see here is that it's not just looking into your own needs, but you're looking about the people you love and what is best for them. You seek to care for those people. Naomi is a wonderful picture here of saying, I need something, but I want to help you all also. But it is Ruth who really drives home this issue when you see her saying that I know what is best here for you, Naomi. You need me. I need to be with you. And she felt led toward being with Naomi, and so she embraced this. But there was this issue that was going on there about what do the others need? What do people around me need? And I see that as such a critical kind of thing, is that as we develop our home life, we are wanting to ask ourselves, what do these folks around me need? What do my brother and sister need? What do my children need? What these decisions that we're going to make, how are we going to impact them? Because we're after this business of becoming unified in life. And to do that, I must care for the people who are right here around me. It's sort of the way in which life was intended to be built. I read once from about the 2018, I think it was, there were Special Olympics that were held up in Seattle, Washington, and the Special Olympics had a 100-yard dash where these young people, some of them had physical problems, others had mental, emotional kind of issues that were there. But they had 9 kids lined up for the 100-yard dash, and they put that dash in quotes because they said it really wasn't a dash, it was more just kind of a walking, running situation as they were all heading down the track. And she said as they went down the track, the article that I read, they went down this track, and there's one of the boys fell, and he rolled over 2 or 3 times and was crying. And the kids heard him, and so all the other 8 turned around and come back to him. And one of the girls who had Down syndrome, she reaches down in there and she kisses him on the head, and she said, it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay. And then the others kind of gather around the boy and they help him up. And when they get standing there, they all lock arms together and they walk across the finish line, and everybody wins. And the picture for me is the power of us caring about what's going on with us, around us. And as I'm wanting to run a race, and this is best for me to run this race in this way, but at the same time I've got needs that are happening in the lives of other people. And there really can be no way for us to be family, to be home in the deepest, richest way, unless I care about what all of this is doing to the people who are around me. It complicates things, I know that. But the good thing is that God is in the business of helping us to make decisions and to walk with us through all of these times in our lives. But it brings me here to say to you that what's going to happen is that we're going to need to be making some risky decisions, and we need to be asking God to give us the courage to risk change that needs to come. I think that when you think about Ruth her willingness to leave a homeland, to leave family, and to say, I'm going to reestablish my life with your life. We're going back over here together to your place. Your God will be my God. And by this time, she is already, I know, experiencing the presence of the one living God in her life. The word that is used here is that the Lord, she speaks of God as, may the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. I'm with you to the end. I'm committed to be with you all the way through. And she's willing to make some really significant changes in her life. That takes courage. And God is the one who gives the courage. God is the one who holds us up. I read about these trapeze artists who were just fantastic. And they had in some great circus that went around. And one of the ministers that I've loved to read after, he talks about having a conversation with one of them, and he was asking guys, said, do you ever do any of this without the net? And they said, oh, no. So the net has to be there. And the reason is because when the net is there, we're able to risk even more than we ever would have risked before. He said, one time I did a flip, three and a half turns, all because I knew that if I slipped and fell, there was something underneath me. God, give us the courage that we need to make some decisions, to make some changes, so that we unify with people that we know and love, and that our lives get richer and deeper and stronger, and we can go forward. I concluded by telling you that I think Ruth would show us, and we can't read this today, but you ought to read chapters 2, 3, and 4, because what she does is when they get back to Bethlehem, she goes to work. They come back to Bethlehem, and you've got complaining on the part of Naomi. She's still just bitter with God, bitter with life. And maybe it's her age, I don't know. I think age affects us a lot about this, of how active we're going to be. But Ruth, she comes back and she says, you know what, I need to get out there and begin doing some harvesting and bring home some grain and some things for us. We're going to be together here, and I've got to get out there. And she had this, they had these wonderful laws in those days that if you were poor and you needed something, you could go to the fields where they're harvesting, and you can walk behind the harvesters and pick up what's sort of left behind there. She went out and began to do that. Ruth did. And she was determined to do that. And the interesting thing is that by chance, it sounds like by chance, she's in the field of this man Boaz. And Boaz becomes attracted to her. He becomes knowledgeable of her. He knows what she has done to care for her mother-in-law. He knows the kind of woman that she is. And so he allows her special privileges in his fields. And before long, Naomi encourages her to sort of play up to Boaz. And she does, and does something symbolic in that culture. And Boaz chooses to become connected to Ruth, and offers to other people who are in the family, if you have right over this property that Naomi and Ruth are on, you have a right also to Ruth if you want her. That's the way they did it in those days. But that person said, no, that would in some way hurt my land and my property. And Boaz said, well, I will claim, and I will be the redeemer of this situation. And he takes Ruth into his life. They marry. And you know what happens if you know this story at all, and that is that there's a child named Obed that comes along. And Obed becomes the father of Jesse. And Jesse is the father of David the king. And down the line, the earthly lineage comes about. You know who comes about then is Jesus. Joseph's family comes out of Bethlehem, and out of this lineage of David. What a thought today to know that if we have the courage to make the changes that we sense God leading us into, if we will follow, if we will get beyond, if somehow move beyond complaining, Move beyond the pain. Find a way to heal, to help, let others help us heal, and to get on down the road with our life as we go forward and begin to do the things that we believe will be the work God wants us to get into. Whatever that is. I don't know how you would put that. But here is Ruth entering into that. And the blessing that comes is a child who blesses the nation, and a great nation grows out of this woman who was so faithful and so committed. I thank the Lord today for each of your families. I thank the Lord for you and the way in which, you experience family life. And pray that whatever the changes, that you would take care of yourself, take care of the people that love you, and that you'd have the courage to risk as God leads. Here we go. Let's sing together as we come to conclusion this morning of our service. Take my life and let it be consecrated to thee. I hope you'll take a hymnal and sing with us. Number 277. Clark, come and lead us in a couple of verses here.